So let's head over to Sarah for Art Talk number 142 to hear all about the creative art of Guillermo del Toro in developing the action-packed puppet version of the story. Over to you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art Talk number 142. So Guillermo del Toro Gomez is a Mexican filmmaker and author, a recipient of 3 Academy Awards, 3 BAFTA Awards, and an Emmy Award. His work has been characterized by a strong connection to fairy tales and horror, with an effort to infuse visual or poetic beauty in the grotesque. Pinocchio is del Toro's first ever stop-motion animated film. His first feature film was supposed to be stop motion, and he and his team built sets and about 100 puppets over a 3-year period prior to filming. But vandals burglarized the studio one night and destroyed the puppets and sets, which put an end to his project, and he decided to switch to a live-action version of his film Kronos in 1993. You might recognize some of his other films, such as Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy, The Shape of Water, Nightmare Alley, Crimson Peak, Pacific Rim. Those are just to name a few. He's done a lot of great work. But today specifically, we're going to focus on an exhibit of the making of Pinocchio that's currently on display at the Museum of Modern Art, or MoMA, in New York. In 1883, Italian writer Carlo Collodi wrote a folktale titled The Adventures of Pinocchio, and that's where the story originates. There have been numerous adaptations since then, with a 2002 version by illustrator Gris Grimly being the main inspiration for del Toro's film and the kind of look and style of Pinocchio. And then there's also this 3D pop-up illustration of the book that was done in 1932. There was a great deal of research done for the film, from the musical score to the character analysis to even the time period which the film takes place. Del Toro's Pinocchio is set in Italy in the 1930s, when the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini was in power. To arrive at the design for the town and the different buildings, the film designers conducted a great deal of historical research. Guillermo has a fascination with fascism and the way that it distorts society. He said, quote, "We wanted to create a story about a world that behaves like a puppet and obeys everything they're told, and a puppet that chooses to be disobedient and finds his own morality, his own soul, and his own humanity by that disobedience." Look development is a creative process that occurs before shooting begins on a film. Artists and craftspeople spend many months experimenting with different mediums and methods required to visualize what's being described in the script and the storyboard and the kind of concept art. You can kind of think of it like a mood board, but in 3D. A shadow machine and animation studio helped to bring to life these concepts in the screenplay. The look development process is all concept art and experimentation. For this film, it's fairly naturalistic, it's organic, it's charming, and has kind of a handmade look to it. It's not overly stylized, but it can take a lot of time to get it right. For example, in the middle, you can see they had to build several different types of wings for the character Death, which is a sphinx-like creature, because they had to consider how many feathers would have to move with the wings. On the right, the dogfish is an ancient creature. The silhouette was based on old maps of sea serpents. And around the dogfish puppet, you can see the kinds of reference materials that the designers and puppet makers used. So a puppet begins with a design. After its shape, features, and scale are explored, a maquette, or a preliminary model, is crafted, which allows the film's creative team to see the design in 3D and at full scale, and to make adjustments accordingly. These are really complicated puppets that take a lot more time to construct than people realize. So they have skeleton bodies that are built usually out of steel with ball and socket joints. From there, the technical elements are developed. For example, specialists engineer the mechanics inside of the puppet. There's usually a complex system of miniature gears, wires, and paddles, enabling an animator to move it. Then a layer of foam is casted over for squishiness and flexibility, and then a layer of silicone to give it a more skin-like appearance when it moves. Finally, the puppet is painted and costumed. So lots of different layers underneath such a small character. The puppet making department is responsible for creating all the characters you see on set. And a full puppet timeline is about 6 months to a year just for one. So it can obviously take a lot or a really large team to make a whole cast of characters. But the puppets never really finished until the day of filming because an animator may ask for certain adjustments in order to achieve certain emotions and looks from the character. Del Toro also collaborated with the Jim Henson Company on this film, which of course is famous for the Sesame Street puppets. Stop motion involves taking an object or a puppet and moving it slightly and shooting a frame, moving it a little bit more and shooting another frame. And these frames are like still photographs. When you arrange them in a sequence and play them back at a certain speed, it creates the illusion of a moving image. Every object and character in a scene is moved and controlled by an animator. Guillermo del Toro urged the animators to think through the puppet and avoid pantomime to give the audience a real sense of acting. The church is one of the central sets in the movie, and it's a reference from medieval churches with the stained glass windows. With something like the church, you're really looking at creating an environment that is real, where a lot of the lighting is naturalistic. And the filmmakers wanted a very cohesive world, so they developed color palettes based on the elements in the world. The art department builds 90% of what you see in each frame. So every little aspect in the environment, someone spent a lot of time on. A lot of the materials that are used are quite common, plywood and plaster, for example. Guillermo was very concerned that things felt and looked real. And so there was a lot of period images referenced. We can see how handmade and specific the different sets are. This is the ocean cliff and the carnival stage. And this is intentional because the film is supposed to seem beautiful and old world. We can get a kind of a sense of scale in this photo. The sets are small and the puppets are even smaller, making the specificity of movement and emotion of the characters even more remarkable. Del Toro said, quote, "Pinocchio is a character thrown into a world with a blank slate to find out who he is, what he's doing in the world, and why he was born. And it's a very existential tale. Can something that was never alive become human? What makes us human? What makes our span in this world precious and valuable and important? And like any other good Mexican, I came up with one answer: death." Co-director Mark Gustafson said, quote, "You don't have a film about life if you don't have a film about death. And it's showing how completely intertwined those things are. There's some sad things in here, and there's some incredibly happy and incredibly funny things." So I highly recommend that everyone watch this film if you haven't. It's streaming on Netflix, so it's pretty accessible to watch at home. And if you're in New York, you can visit this exhibit until I think it's April 15th. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Del Toro has said that he sees the Pinocchio story as a positive metaphor for the changing and challenging journey of life, and that he hopes the film will inspire his audiences.